Hello, hello, welcome everybody. I'm Jev. Yes, Triple V. The accent, by the way, is purely Kiwi. I read old stories for children, so we keep this a family-friendly channel by having bad word blockers, banning bots, and preventing spam. So that means new followers need to wait a few minutes before they can join in the chat. Since these stories are so old, they're now in the public domain, which means they are free to read for anyone and by anyone, the way many Christmas songs are. The digital versions I read are from Project Gutenberg, and you'll find the link for that below. The physical ones are just old books my family has lying around. Sometimes I'll even show them to you. These, by the way, are live reads. Think of them as bedtime stories rather than actual audiobooks. You get the benefits of my mistakes, distractions, explanations, and terrible attempts at accents, along with plenty of chat and interruptions as we find out about things in the story. If you need to do work or chores, then that's fine. Just come and lurk. Please adjust your volume to suit. There are captions available if you have to be quiet or you have hearing challenges, but be warned, sometimes the captions aren't always that accurate. I am a member of the Codex, an awesome group of reading streamers on Twitch. People from many walks of life who share their love of reading, and you'll find links to the Codex reading team and our Discord server below. A special feature of the Codex Discord is the security channel for those of you who stream or moderate. You'll find lots of practical, useful information to help keep your stream and your community safe. So, hang around and come discover adventure with me. You never know what we'll find.
catching my breath, rushed upstairs because I was thinking, it's too close to starting time. And also at the same time going, I need to open the skylights and I need to find the sleeve for my drink, and I can't find it, and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah. Yes, I've still got Disney ducks there. So, I don't have anything Nancy Drew. So that's why we don't have anything Nancy Drew. And yeah, my hair is all... I would let my hair down, except that it would be very fluffy and also way too warm. See if I can find another hair slide so I can keep this side. And oh, look, great, they're missing teeth. Just to keep it out of the way so it doesn't bother me so much. I saw it the other day. My drink sleeve. I have no idea where it is. So I think what I'm going to have to do instead is pour it into a glass. It's looking a bit dirty. But it's only the inside, and it's only the sticky from the last drink I had in there, so I suppose that's okay. And we get to find out what colour this is. Oh yay, it's brown. I'll be doing other things very shortly. I'll just show you my drink. See, there's my drink for today. Looks like a cola, but it's not. It's a dandelion and burdock, which is a very English thing. And no, I haven't got any words sorted out for today, but that's all right. We can do that next time. I don't know how long this book's going... Yeah, I'm wiggling my chair around. I don't know how long this book is going to take to read through. So what we have today is Nancy Drew, The Secret of the Old Clock. That's the details up there. It is the very first Nancy Drew book that was published. And it was published in 1930, and there were 4 books published because that's the way that Stratemeyer Syndicate and Edward Stratemeyer did things, to kick things off well, to make sure that they had actually made a good choice with what the book idea was, the story series idea was. And they did. They're even still making movies about Nancy Drew. And I read the Nancy Drew detective stories, basically, that's what they are, when I was at secondary school. Maybe at intermediate, so that would be junior high and high school if you're in North America. I don't know what the Canadians call it, and I think it depends on what province you're in, actually. But in the States, I'm pretty sure that that's how it works, is it's junior high and high school. So I would have read it in late junior high. We only have 2 years as the equivalent for that. And high school, which is the other bit for secondary before you go off to university or college. I don't think I read them all. I'm pretty sure that The Secret of the Old Clock was one of the early ones that I read, and there was something about something in a hollow tree somewhere too, was another one of the early ones I read. But they have only just, these 4 have only just become public domain as of the 1st of January this year. And yay, because I've had so many people, when they ask me what I do for the fun of it online, and I talk about reading really old kids' books, they say, "Oh, Nancy Drew, right?" Well, thank you for thinking of that, but no, she wasn't quite old enough, but now she is. The first 4 books are, anyway. We'll see how we go. Let's have a tips video. So these are tips for those who haven't been here before, to make, so you can know how to make the most of your time here, and they're reminders for those of you who have been here before. So we'll see. Here we go. Who have we got today? Who are we going to welcome to be our tip bringer for today? And welcome back, everybody. So good to have you here. Right, we are going to get on with reading The Secret of the Old Clock by Carolyn Keene. Now, before we get started, nobody knows where the books are set. There's an imaginary town, and there is a theory that it could have been set in Illinois, which is a state that touches on one of the Great Lakes. And there's also a theory that it could have been set in Maine, which is the furthest eastern of the states, one of the maritime states. Yeah, they have no definite about it. The reason for the thinking of it being Illinois is because the actual ghostwriter who wrote the first handful of the books, who really was quite instrumental in helping to set the tone for what Nancy Drew was initially like. She came from over that way somewhere. I think it was Illinois, but I'm not quite sure. I don't remember. You can look it up online. It's on Wikipedia about who the actual writer was for the first books. I do know that she, in agreement with Edward Stratemeyer, actually wrote Nancy Drew as being a lot more feisty than what she became in the later revisions of the first books, that Edward's daughter Harriet, I think it was in charge of setting up. Her idea with her revisions were to reduce some of the racism and some of the violence, apparently. But apparently some of the stories are very, very different from what they originally were. And I don't know which ones I read, whether they were the original editions or reprints of the original editions or the later ones. Maybe we'll find out. I don't know. I'm going to assume that because it was so long ago that I read them, that there's going to be lots of it that I don't remember anyway, so that doesn't matter. So we will get started in a moment. Project Gutenberg does not yet have this particular book because it is still in the edit stage over at Distributed Proofreaders or Distributed Proofreaders. I don't know if it's distributed or distributed. I don't know if they actually mean any different, if it's just different pronunciations. It's on the bronze list. You can actually find out where some books are over there. There are 2 books that are on the bronze list that I could find. So you've got the gold list, the silver list, and the bronze list, and it just depends on how far through the process, the editing, the scanning, editing, proofreading those edits, all that sort of stuff, and then actually formatting for release. It depends on how far through that process they are, and you can actually look those up. In fact, let's see if I can find the place I looked before. So if you're looking for distributed proofreaders, if you actually look, hang on, first of all, we've got Project Gutenberg. There's a link for Project Gutenberg. And then it says at the very end of that, There's a Command DP for distributed proofreaders. Why am I having so much trouble with that? So these are linked for PGDP, Project Gutenberg Distributed Proofreaders. And you can volunteer to actually be part of the process. But if you want to find out how far through a book they are, I did find it before. Current progress. If you scroll down to the very bottom of that first page, you've got a section there just above the footer that's called current progress. And there's a picture of a gold star, a silver star, and a bronze star. And it says in the gold star, 50,130 in completed. That means they're ready to go. They have not yet been released onto Project Gutenberg, but they are ready to go. These books have been processed through our site and posted to the Project Gutenberg archive. So they're already there. Okay. And you can actually, there's a clickable link for those 50,130 that have been completed. So you can see what they've done. That'll take a lot of scrolling because they've got, clicking links and scrolling because they've got 50 books per page, I think. And then there are 2,123 that are in progress. These books are undergoing their final checks before being assembled into a completed ebook. And they put them into the various formats that you download from on Project Gutenberg. And then there's 677 in proofreading. These books are currently being processed through our site. Sign in and start helping. Now, I looked, and this particular one, The Secret of the Old Clock, was at about number 17 on that list at the moment. When I looked yesterday, it was at number 20. So it's getting there. I think that's the one it was. And there's another one that's also on the bronze list at the moment. So they will have it on Project Gutenberg soon. The copy of it that I have is actually from Faded Page over. Faded Page is kind of like Canada's version of Project Gutenberg. I know that Australia has a Project Gutenberg Australia. So Canada has one called Faded Page, and they've had the book there for a little while, but I don't know how long, because I know that their copyright terms are slightly different to the American terms. Anyway, so let's get on with this. We are going to start The Secret of the Old Clock. So I've got a tiny little thumbnail of it up here. There, I've got this picture of these woods behind us, which are nothing to do with where she actually is, because we don't know where she was. But it's just to sort of set the mood, because often it's in gloomy nighttime stuff for part of the story. That's just the way they work. And yeah, if you look in the Discord server, you will be able to see where, no, not where, you'll be able to see a little cropped outline of a picture of Nancy Drew from the cover. And I've taken it from that image, actually. So that was what I used for the social media post today. So, Chapter 1, The Lost Will. It would be a shame if all that money went to the Tophams. They'll fly higher than ever. Nancy Drew, a pretty girl of 16, later on she was 18, and stayed 18 for the rest of the books, I think, leaned over the library table and addressed her father, who sat reading a newspaper by the study lamp. I beg your pardon, Nancy. What were you saying about the Tophams? Carson Drew, a noted criminal and mystery case lawyer. Oh, that's what they were called then, mystery case. Known far and wide for his work as a former district attorney, looked up from his evening paper and smiled indulgently upon his only daughter. Now, as he gave her his respectful attention, he was not particularly concerned with the Richard Topham family, but rather with the rich glow of the lamp upon Nancy's curly golden bob. She had a shortish haircut. Not at all the sort of head which one expected to indulge in serious thoughts, he told himself. Mischievously, Nancy reached over and tweaked his ear. You weren't paying a bit of attention, she accused him sternly. I was saying I think it's mean if those snobbish Tophams fall heir to all of Josiah Crowley's fortune. Can't something be done about it? Removing his horn-rimmed spectacles and carefully folding the paper, Carson Drew regarded his daughter meditatively. I'm afraid not, Nancy. A will is a will, you know. But it does seem unfair that all the money should go to them, especially when they never treated Josiah Crowley like a human being. The Tophams were never noted for their charitable dispositions, Carson Drew observed with a smile. However, they did give Josiah a home. Yes, and everyone knows why. They wanted to work him into leaving all his money to them. And it seems that their scheme worked too. They treated him like a prince until he made his will in their favour, and then they acted as though he were dirt under their feet. Folks said he died just to be rid of their everlasting nagging. The Tophams aren't very well liked in our little city, are they? Mr. Drew commented dryly. Who could like them, Father? Richard Topham is an old skinflint who made his money by gambling on the stock exchange, and Cora, his wife, is... The implication there is not that the stock exchange is wrong, but people who just throw lots of money at it as a get-rich-quick scheme with no consideration for what the impact that they might be having on small businesses that are just listed and things like that. That's some of the bundle there. And people who are just sort of like, they're not wisely thinking things through, I would think. The top no, where do we get to? And Cora, his wife, is nothing but a vapid social climber. The two girls, Isabel and Ada, are even worse. I went to school with them and I never saw such stuck-up creatures in all my life. If they fall heir to any more money, this town won't be big enough to hold them. So she's got some fairly strong opinions, which apparently got toned down in the revision. I think I'm glad that we're reading the first edition. In her estimate of the Topham family, Nancy Drew did not exaggerate. Nearly everyone in River Heights shared the opinion that the Tophams were snobbish and arrogant, and the treatment they accorded old Josiah Crowley had aroused a great deal of unfavourable comment. Nancy had never known Josiah well, but had often seen him on the street and secretly had regarded him as a rather nice but extremely odd sort of individual. His wife had died during the influenza epidemic following the World War. That's the First World War, because they haven't had the second one yet. And since that time, Crowley had made his home with various relatives. Although well-to-do, he preferred to visit around. At first, the Tophams had evidenced no interest in the old man and had been forced to live with kindly relatives who were scarcely able to have him with them. Crowley appreciated the sacrifice and openly declared that he intended to make his will in their favour. Then, 3 years before his death, the Topham family experienced a sudden change of heart. They begged Josiah Crowley to make his home with them, and at last he consented. Presently, rumour had it that the Tophams had induced him to make his will in their favour. But as time went on and Mr. Crowley, though failing in health, maintained as firm a grip on life as ever, the Tophams treated him unkindly. Although he continued to live with them, it was whispered about that frequently he slipped away to visit his old friends, and that he intended to change his will again, cutting the Tophams out entirely. Then one day Josiah Crowley took to his bed and did not get up. Just before his death he attempted to communicate something to the doctor who attended him, but his words were unintelligible. After the funeral, only one will came to light, and to the surprise of everyone, it gave the entire fortune to the Tophams. Father, what do you suppose it was that Mr. Crowley tried to tell the doctor just before he died? Nancy demanded, after a moment of thought. Do you imagine he was trying to disclose something about his will? Very likely, Nancy. Probably he intended to leave his money to more deserving relatives, but fate cheated him of the opportunity. But isn't it possible that he did make such a will and that he was trying to tell what he'd done with it? Yes, that is a possibility, of course. Josiah Crowley was rather odd in many ways. Perhaps he hid the will somewhere, said Nancy, thoughtfully. If he did, I'm afraid it will never come to light. The Tophams will see to that. What do you mean, Father? The estate is a considerable one. I understand, Nancy. I understand. The estate is a considerable one, I understand, Nancy, and the Tophams don't intend that anyone shall get a cent of it. It's my private opinion that they will take care that a second will is never found. Do you mean that if they discovered the will they would destroy it? Well, I'm not making any accusations, Nancy, but I do know that Richard Topham is shrewd, and he isn't noted for his honesty. Can't the present will be broken? I doubt it. While I haven't gone into the case, I am of the opinion that the Tophams have a legal right to the fortune. It would cost considerable to contest the will, and so far as I know, the other relatives are in poverty. They have filed a claim declaring that a latter will was made in their favour, but I doubt that the matter will ever go further. But the Tophams don't deserve the fortune, Father. It doesn't seem fair. No, it isn't fair, but it is legal, and I'm afraid nothing can be done about it. There were 2 girls who lived somewhere on the River Road that were great pets of Crowley's when they were children. It seems to me that they should have had something, and there were a number of relatives who really deserve a portion of the fortune. Nancy nodded thoughtfully and relapsed into silence while she digested the facts of the case. From her father she had acquired the habit of thinking things through to their logical conclusion, which was considered to be not a very common thing for girls back then. That's why they're highlighting it. Frequently, Carson Drew had assured her that she went at a thing like a detective. Certainly she had a naturally clever mind and took more than an ordinary interest in strange or baffling cases. Carson Drew, a widower, showered a great deal of affection upon his daughter. It was his secret boast that he had taught her to think for herself and to think logically. Now, I'm just going to pause for a moment because we're not right at the end of the chapter. It was very deliberate, the choice of the type of character, the type of personality, and the type of thinking ability that Nancy had when Edward Stratemeyer, the head of the Stratemeyer Syndicate and the original author of some of the earlier books, and the author that became known as Carolyn Keene, were setting up this book. And she actually, as she was writing, had quite a guiding hand in some of the very early stories of the personification of who Nancy was, and the fact that she was pretty feisty in her own way and prepared to do things that weren't that commonly done by girls. Because I think that between the 2 of them, they both realised that girls could do with a little bit of an oomph in the right direction to actually, be a little bit more active, get a little bit more involved in things, take an interest in stuff, instead of being just complying with their assigned roles in society. Which I don't think Harriet, Edward's daughter, really got on with that idea, unfortunately. Anyway, we'll carry on with reading. Certainly she had a naturally clever we read that bit. It was his secret boast that he had taught her to think for herself and to think logically. Since he knew that Nancy could be trusted with confidential information, he frequently discussed his interesting cases with her. A number of times Nancy had been present at interviews which her father had had with noted detectives who desired his aid in solving perplexing mysteries, and those occasions stood out as red-letter days for her. There was something about a mystery which aroused Nancy's interest, and she was never content until it was solved. More than once her father had found her suggestions, or intuitions, that's the way they're written, as he called them, extremely helpful. Oh, that's what that is. It's not a number 7, it's just a fold in the fabric. For a reason which she could not understand, the Crowley case had attracted Nancy's attention, although it had not fallen into her father's hands. She had a certain feeling that a mystery lurked behind it. "Father, do you believe Josiah Crowley ever made a second will?" Nancy demanded suddenly. "You're a regular lawyer, the way you cross-examine me," Carson Drew protested, but with evident enjoyment. "To tell you the truth, I don't know whether he ever made a second will or not. All I do know is that... But perhaps I shouldn't mention it, since my information is not very definite." How to bait her. "Go on," Nancy commanded impatiently. "You're trying to tease me." "Well, I do remember that one day nearly a year ago I was standing in the First National Bank when Crowley came in with Henry Rolstead, not the attorney who specialises in wills and legal documents." "Yes, well, as I was saying, they came into the bank together. I had no intention of listening to their conversation, but I couldn't help but hear that they were discussing a will." Crowley made an appointment to call at Rolsted's office the following day. That looks as though Mr. Crowley had made up his mind to write a new will, doesn't it? That was the thought which passed through my mind at the time. You say you overheard the conversation nearly a year ago? Nancy mused. That was nearly 2 years after Mr. Crowley had made the will in favour of the Tophams, wasn't it? Yes, it's likely Crowley had made up his mind to change the will. I suspect he intended to cut the Tophams out, but whether or not he did, I have no way of knowing. Mr. Rolsted's an old friend of yours, isn't he? He is an old friend and an old college classmate. Then why don't you ask him if he ever drew up a will for Mr. Crowley? That's a rather delicate question to ask, young lady. He may tell me it's none of my business. You know he won't. You're such a noted attorney that other lawyers feel flattered when you take an interest in their cases. Will you do it, please? I can't promise to blunder into his office and demand the information. Why this sudden interest in the case, Nancy? Oh, I don't know. A mystery always interests me, I guess. And it does seem to me that someone ought to help those poor relatives. You take after your old dad, I'm afraid, but I'm curious to know what mystery you have discovered. If a will is missing, isn't that a mystery? If it is actually missing, yes, but it is possible that if Crowley ever wrote the will, he changed his mind and destroyed it. He was subject to sudden whims, you know. Anyhow, I'd like to learn more about the case if I can. Will you talk with Mr. Rolsted? You are persistent, Nancy, and Mr. Drew smiled. Well, I suppose I could invite him to take luncheon with me tomorrow. Oh, please do, Nancy interrupted eagerly. That would be a splendid opportunity to find out everything he knows about the will. All right, I'll try to do it, but I warn you not to expect startling news. Carson Drew glanced at his watch. Why, it's nearly midnight, Nancy. We've been discussing this case for over an hour. Better run off to bed now and forget the Tophams. All right, Nancy agreed somewhat reluctantly. Don't forget your promise tomorrow at luncheon. Long after his daughter had retired, Carson Drew sat by the fire. At last he too arose. It wouldn't surprise me if Nancy has stumbled upon a real mystery, he told himself, as he snapped out the electric light and turned toward the stairway. Perhaps I shouldn't encourage her to dig into it, but after all, it's in a good cause. Goody, he says, every time you say Mr. Drew, I can't help but picture Fairy Godmother Drew. Emphasised extra because of having been in Disney Dreamlight Valley recently. Yes, there's some of us who consider that the Fairy Godmother character in Disney Dreamlight Valley game is a very strong reminder of Drew Carey, especially a few years ago, and has some really odd mannerisms too. Right. Oh, I want to show you something. Where's the other thing? I don't know where the other thing is. Why am I putting things down and not finding them? Oh, no, I found the other thing. Right, so I got myself this fountain pen here. Actually, I'll take it out of the little packet. Doesn't need to be in there. I remember the very first time I came across one of these resealable bags, not Ziploc bags, but the ones that have a little thin strip of sticky adhesive on the flap, sticky adhesive on that flap, and it's a cellophane style bag, and it was on a little miniature cross stitch set that someone gave me as a gift, and I don't know how they had it or why they had it. It hadn't been stuck down, and the non-sticky paper that was stuck across the adhesive strip so it didn't catch on anything else was actually had Japanese writing on it. Oh, lovely. Thank you so much for telling me that. There's a tag on there that says fountain pen. I knew it was a fountain pen. I bought one, but it also has on the other side of that, you can't quite see it, that bit there says converter. So this pen I got because it's a fountain pen, but it's also one that I don't have to use with refills. It has a converter. Instead of having to buy cartridges to put into it and then throw them away, I can fill up the converter and reassemble the pen, and once it's all together, I will be able to see, that black is just part of the converter, I'll be able to see the colour of the ink that I've got and how much is in there. I don't know what the nib's like, but it's a, that doesn't look too bad. It looks similar to some of my old ones. It's a Herbin, Herbin brand fountain pen, and they make some very nice inks too. I haven't had one of their pens before. I haven't bought a brand new fountain pen for a very long time, if ever, as far as I know. But what got me onto it was this ink. It looks black. Let's see if I can get it so you can see the colour in the ink. You can catch flashes of it. It's purple. It is a gorgeous purple colour. You can see it up here. And so I am looking forward to using it. It's very hard to show you well. And it was on special. Yeah, very fancy. I like it. As an ADHD person and autistic, but not knowing it when I was at school, my writing was reasonable when I used to use a pencil, because that's what we did for all of primary school, which is elementary school. And then when we went to our school, because it was rural, we went from primary school to secondary school, and the intermediate level, which is Form 1 and 2, Year 7 and 8, junior high school, was actually combined as the youngest classes in the high school. So when you get to college, because our one was technically was called a college, it doesn't have, college means something completely different in the Commonwealth countries, okay? So just accept it. So when I got to college, they actually said we had to stop using a pencil unless it was for maths. Yes, maths, because it's mathematics, not mathematic. We had to use a ballpoint pen. Well, we had to use a pen. We had to use stuff that we couldn't just rub out and learn to use it. Now, my writing was terrible, and I figured out in the end it was because there was not very much friction with a ballpoint pen. They slide very, very easily across the page. And so I was having to work so much harder to keep it neat and tidy. In fact, in 1 year at school, I had a teacher who gave me a D for, we had to hand in all of our schoolwork at one stage, and she just went through and assessed how we'd done with keeping records of the notes that she'd given us and writing everything down and stuff, and she'd given me a D. And one of her comments to the whole class for all of us when she was talking about our assessments was, if you get a D, that means it's not tidy enough as well as everything else, and you have to rewrite it. Whether it's an assignment, whether it's your schoolwork, the folder. And I'm thinking, like, she wants me to rewrite the whole folder. Notebook, if you're North American, or if you're American. Anyway, I randomly came across an old fountain pen that used to be my dad's, and there was still ink around for it, so I filled it up and started using that. And initially, my thinking was to blame the fountain pen for any further mess in my schoolwork once I started using it, because, you know, they blot and the nib can catch, because paper didn't used to be as smooth as it is now. The nib can catch and then flick and spray ink over things and all sorts of stuff like this. I found that my writing got neater, and later on, when I was a bit older, I actually figured it out. It was because of the texture of the paper. I could feel the friction, the texture of the paper through the pen when I used a fountain pen, just like you can when you use a graphite pencil. And I've loved them ever since. My writing can get reasonably neat and tidy if I'm not in a hurry. If I'm using a fountain pen, it's terrible with a ballpoint pen. So I do have a loose collection of fountain pens, which I have shown some of you before. Anyway, so let's get on with the next chapter. So that was my lovely thing that just arrived. And I also got, you can't see it. I don't think you can. This is meant to be, it's called Midnight Blue, but it's actually purple. It's a fabric dye ink that you can apply on the surface of fabric to change it to whatever the colour is. And it doesn't wreck the texture of the fabric. It doesn't make it go hard like using a normal paint over it. And I'm going to use, if I get around to it, I'm going to use it on that letterboard, the pink thing, which is shockingly pink, and also too light a colour for the letters to stand out on. So I'm going to see if I can actually get that coloured up so that it's actually easier to see anything that's written on it at some stage. And they're all from a craft supplier. So that all came this morning. Yay! Let's carry on with chapter 2 of Nancy Drew and the Secret of the Old Clock. 16 pages in this chapter, and we do have chapter numbers and names, which is wonderful. And even in the index, they're done the same way too. Come on, they're Roman numerals. Chapter 2, A Chance Meeting. Yes, Nancy Drew, yay! The very first one that's available. Not from Project Gutenberg yet, because they haven't yet got it. They're still waiting for distributed proofreaders to get it through the rest of their process. But it's getting there. It's getting there. You can actually check that out on the distributed proofreaders website, actually. If you actually just type in !DP, and it will give you a command which has a link for the distributed proofreaders, and you scroll to the very bottom and it gives you links for the different stages that books can be at, and you can actually look through those. So here we go. Chapter 2, A Chance Meeting. Oh, by the way, while you're listening to the stories, if you did read Nancy Drew at some stage, keep an ear out for whether you think the ones that you read were the later editions from 1955 onwards, I think, or based off the original editions. What I've read about them, the original editions are going to be a lot more appealing for some of us. She was a lot less filtered. So we'll see. Chapter 2, A Chance Meeting. Don't forget your luncheon engagement with Mr. Rolstead, Nancy Drew reminded her father the next morning at the breakfast table. I'll telephone him the first thing after I reach my office, Carson Drew promised. Oh, yeah, I am going to interrupt again. It's quite surprising. She was written as quite a feisty character right from the start for the day and age. And less filtered Nancy Drew. Is that like decaf? No, it's the opposite of decaf. Less filtered. Both Edward Stratemeyer and the original author had it in their heads that she needed to be a strong character, and she was. She didn't sort of sit around waiting for permission from adults so much in the original editions, whereas the later editions that were edited, and some of them quite seriously edited, like almost unrecognizable stories by Edward Stratemeyer's daughter, one of his daughters. She wasn't a damsel in distress. I mean, she does get stuck from time to time and need help, but not in the typical way for the era that the books are from, to the same extent. Anyway, so we'll carry on. I'll tell him all of that to say, keep an ear out to the story and see if you think that the ones that you remember were the early editions or the later editions. That's what that was about. It's a Talking Heads song now. They wanted her to be fiery, and she was. Excellent. Right. I'll telephone him first thing after I reach my office, Carson Drew promised. And I've gone and lost it already. But again, I warn you not to anticipate startling news. "I won't, Father," Nancy laughed, "but if I should happen to learn something which has bearing on the missing will, I won't be exactly disappointed." "What are your plans for the day, Nancy?" "Oh, nothing special. I thought I'd do a little shopping this morning, and I am invited to a party one of the girls is giving in the afternoon." "Then you are too busy to take luncheon with me." "Oh, Father, you know I've been dying for an invitation," Nancy declared, her eyes dancing. "I'm so anxious to learn something about that will." "So, yes, she is middle class, she's well off middle class, she's white blonde, all of that sort of stuff. But for all that, we're going to get a better character." She didn't let that hold her back. And as is typical for the Stratemeyer Syndicate books, the strata of society that the main characters are set in have enough money behind them to be able to do all these adventurous things, whether it's an adventure story or detective story or whatever like that. The inventions, because it was a stretching kids' imaginations series. All of the books they did stretched kids' imaginations and got them to daydream about stuff. Because if you can get them connected with things like that, then they're going to want to read more stories, which means you can sell more stories. But it also does actually build into their sense of being and purpose. So we'll carry on. All right, if you have time, drop in at my office about 12:30. Mr. Rolstead may not accept my invitation, but if he does, we'll try to find out something about Josiah Crowley. Of course, I don't need to warn you not to appear too eager for information." "I'll let you do all the talking," Nancy told him. "I'll just keep my ears open." "Yeah, right." "I'll look for you at 12:30 then." Mr. Drew pushed back his chair and, glancing at his watch, "I must hurry now or I'll be late getting downtown." After her father had left, Nancy Drew finished her breakfast and then went to the kitchen to consult with Hannah, the maid, concerning the work of the day. Although only 16, Nancy was unusually capable, and under her skillful direction, everything ran smoothly in the Drew household. So she's basically the head of the household, which wasn't quite so common at that age, but in some ways it was. Children in some contexts had to grow up a lot more when there was need. On the death of her mother 6 years before, so that's when she was 10, she had taken over the entire management of the establishment. The Drews employed one servant, Hannah Gruen, an elderly maid of all work who had been with them for many years. The responsibility of the household might have weighed heavily upon Nancy, but she was the type of girl who's capable of accomplishing a great many things in a comparatively short length of time. Unlike some of us. She enjoyed sports of all kinds, and she found time for clubs and parties. So a real go-getter then. In school, Nancy had been very popular, and she boasted many friends. People declared that she had a way of taking life very seriously without impressing one as being the least bit serious herself. While at school, Nancy had made one particular chum, Helen Corning, of whom we shall hear more later. She had also made 2 enemies, the Topham sisters. Once she had caught Ada in wrongdoing in class, and both sisters had placed the blame on Nancy, but Helen and the 2 others had come to Nancy's rescue. Since that time, Ada and Isabel had been more hateful to Nancy than ever. They're not going to like it if she finds another will, and also resolves everything. "I'll not be back for luncheon today," Nancy told Hannah as she prepared to leave the house. "I've made out the dinner menu and ordered the groceries, so I guess you won't need me for a few hours." Ada and Ilda, a.k.a. Arsenic and Old Lace. I started to watch that again the other night, but I didn't get very far. I couldn't concentrate. "I guess you won't need me for a few hours." Leaving the house, they went to the garage where she kept her automobile. It was a shining new blue roadster. I told you they had money. The birthday gift of her father. Wow. No, we had to save up for a vehicle for ourselves. We didn't get them as gifts. Quickly backing the automobile to the street, she set off for the shopping district. She drove swiftly down the boulevard and, upon reaching the more congested streets, wormed her way skillfully through the heavy traffic. Entering a department store, she made a number of small purchases on the main floor and then went directly to the wearing apparel section. Clothing? Wearing apparel? Okay. As it was her intention to purchase a frock suitable for the afternoon party to which she had been invited. Frock. I don't know what the history of that word is, but I do know that these days if a guy says, "Oh, that's a nice frock," women tend to feel rather insulted by it, whether it's a dress or a skirt and top. And more often than not these days, they're wearing a skirt and a top, which means it's not a dress, therefore it's definitely not a frock. I'm guessing on the words. I should probably turn on language filter for inappropriate language. Is that what you're saying? For the subtitles? Let's have a look at them. Just to make sure that if we do get this word again. Okay, thank you. Profanity filter. On. It says it's unreliable though. Subs BF bombing. So if you are listening and later on watching this as a VOD, I don't swear on screen. So if the subtitles do, just know that that's not what I'm actually saying. You need to listen to the sounds that you are hearing coming out of my mouth. And yes, it is set to New Zealand English. Well, it's super, super rare. That's good. It's now actually set for having that language filter turned on. So hopefully it's okay, if you're able to anyways, yeah. Where do we get to? Suitable for the afternoon party to which she had been invited. Usually Nancy found the service excellent, but this morning was an especially busy one and an extra rush of customers had temporarily overwhelmed the sales force. She did not mind waiting her turn, but quietly sat down in a convenient chair and glanced about with interest. After a time her attention, blah, blah, words were not good, was attracted toward two girls who, like herself, were waiting for an available saleswoman, but less patiently. Instantly, Nancy recognised them as Ada and Isabel Topham. Of course. They were remonstrating with the floor manager, and their voices carried so far that she could not help hearing what they said. "We've been standing here nearly 10 minutes, Ada said petulantly. "Send a saleswoman to us immediately." "I'm afraid I can't," the floor manager said regretfully. "There are a number of others ahead of you, an extra rush of customers." "Perhaps you don't know who we are," Ada interrupted rudely. "Indeed I do," the floor manager told her with a trace of weariness. "I will have a saleswoman here in a few moments, if you will only wait." "We are not accustomed to waiting," Isabel Topham told him icily. Oh, it's a man, sorry. The floor manager's a man. Told him icily. "Such service," Ada chimed in. I'm not even going to try and define which one's Ada and which one's Isabel, because it's not telling me their names until I get through the paragraph of their words. "Such service," Ada chimed in. "Do you realise that my father owns stock in the store? If we report your conduct to him, he could have you discharged." "I'm sorry," the harassed floor manager apologised, "but it is a rule of the store. You must await your turn." Ada tossed her head and her dark eyes flashed angrily. In spite of the expensive clothes she wore, she was anything but attractive. Maybe they talk like those Aussie twinnies. I don't know, because I don't follow the Aussie twinnies. I don't want to. Ada tossed her head and her dark eyes flashed angrily. In spite of the expensive clothes she wore, she was anything but attractive, for she was tall and slender to the point of being termed skinny. Now that her face was distorted with anger, she was positively ugly. Isabel, who was the pride of the Topham family, was rather pretty in a vapid sort of way, but Nancy Drew thought that her face lacked character. She had acquired an artificial manner of speaking which was both irritating and amusing. Let's see if I can find the shame bottle, actually. Yes, shame. I probably need to have that word back up on the screen too. Key. There it is, shame. She had acquired an artificial manner of speaking, which was both irritating and amusing. It was her mother's ambition that someday she should marry into a wealthy family, and every opportunity was given her for a brilliant match. The two sisters, it's a bit like the Ugly Stepsisters, isn't it? Especially if you watched Ever After. I think that's the best version. The two sisters were older than Nancy, but had been in her class at school, which would mean that they weren't quite as intelligent as she was, because either she got ahead or they were held back, because people were not scared to do that at the time at school, to actually hold students back a grade if they weren't doing well. We didn't have anything like that until you got to the very last couple of years at school. If you didn't pass certain exams because they were essential for the next stage of the schoolwork that you were doing, then you just stayed in that level if you stayed at school and had another go at those exams. So it's interesting that they make a note of the fact that they were older than her. She'd found them stupid as well as arrogant. They had never been popular with their classmates and had boasted new friends. They had never been popular with their classmates and had boasted new friends. I don't know. Doesn't mean anything to me. Now, as they turned from the floor manager and saw her for the first time, Nancy bowed. Isabel coldly returned the bow, but did not speak a word of greeting. Ada gave no indication that she had even noticed her. Snobs, Nancy told herself. The next time I won't even bother to speak to them. Well, she hasn't. At that moment, a saleswoman hurried towards the Topham girls, and at once they began to shower abuse upon her for her failure to wait upon them sooner. Nancy watched them curiously as they examined the gowns which the saleswoman brought out for their approval. Evidently, Isabel and Ada were in an unpleasant frame of mind, for they tossed aside beautiful creations of lace and chiffon. With scarcely a second glance, they found fault with everything. A very chic gown, the saleswoman told them hopefully, as she displayed an attractive dress. It is a Paris model and arrived this morning, so it's really expensive. It's been shipped from Paris, France. Ada picked it up, gave it one careless glance, and then tossed it into a chair. The gown slipped to the floor in a crumpled mass, and to the horror of the saleswoman, Ada stepped on it as she turned to examine another dress. In disgust, Nancy moved away and began to examine a rack of dresses in another part of the room. Presently, as she wandered back, she saw that Ada and Isabel were leaving without having made a purchase. As they swept past, Ada brushed against her. Instead of apologising, she wheeled and surveyed Nancy coldly. "Do watch where you are going," she said tartly. Nancy stifled a sharp retort and made no reply. Not without amusement, she watched the Topham sisters as they flounced to the elevator. Not a word we often hear anymore. I don't wonder that people say such mean things about them, Nancy told herself. Her thoughts were cut short as a saleswoman offered her services. It was the same girl who'd waited upon the Topham sisters. Nancy quickly selected a party frock of blue crepe, which matched her eyes. Oh, we've got a frog now! Have to remember that as a swear word. Of blue crepe, which matched her eyes, and went to the fitting room to try it on. They're talking about the colour, not the texture, obviously. "It's a real pleasure to serve you, Miss Drew," the saleswoman assured her when they were alone. "But how I dread to see the Topham sisters come into the store. They are so unreasonable." Ada and Isabel aren't very popular, Nancy agreed. They seem to think their word is law. The saleswoman sighed. And I'm afraid it will be if they get all of Josiah Crowley's money. She lowered her voice. The estate hasn't been settled, but they're counting on the fortune already. I heard Miss Ada say to her sister, "Oh, I guess we'll get all of old Crowley's fortune as soon as the lawyers stop squabbling. But it's my opinion the Tophams are mightily worried for fear somebody will show up with a later will, which may do them out of most of it." Very knives out indeed. Nancy was far too wise to engage in gossip with the saleswoman, for she could not tell how far anything she might say would be carried. But she's listening. That's not in there, but we know she's listening. She's taking all this information in. But she was interested in the information. The fact that the Tophams were worried indicated to her that they were of the opinion that Josiah Crowley had made a second will. Evidently they were somewhat disturbed by the claims of the other relatives. Ordering the frock which she had purchased sent to her home. I've never seen it written with a Q. Which she had purchased, sent to her home, Nancy glanced at her watch and saw that it was after 12 o'clock. I must hurry or I'll be late in meeting father, she thought, and left the store. I thought the dress was to wear for lunch. Isn't that what the event was? She drove directly to her father's office. It must be some other event, I don't know. She drove directly to her father's office, and although a few minutes ahead of the appointed time, found that he was ready to leave. What luck, father? Has there been any luck? Not what luck, father? As in statement. No, this one's a question. Nancy demanded eagerly when they were alone in the inner office. Did Mr. Rolstead promise to take luncheon with you? Yes, we are to meet him at the Royal Hotel in 10 minutes. Do you still think I should quiz him about the Crowley will? Oh, I'm more than ever interested in the case, father. I can't tell you why, but I just seem to know that Josiah Crowley made a second will. Well, your intuitions are frequently correct, Nancy, Mr. Drew smiled. So I'll do my best to find out what Mr. Rolstead knows about the case. However, I must warn you not to appear too eager for information, or he may suspect we have a dark motive behind the luncheon invitation. I'll be careful, Nancy laughed. The Royal Hotel was located less than a block away, and Nancy and her father quickly walked the distance. As they entered the lobby, they found Mr. Rolstead there ahead of them. Carson Drew introduced his daughter, and the three made their way to the dining room, where a table had been reserved for them. At first the conversation centred about a variety of subjects. As the luncheon progressed, the two lawyers began to talk enthusiastically of their college days, and finally of their profession. Nancy began to fear that the subject of the Crowley estate would never be brought up. Then, over the coffee cups, Carson Drew skillfully swung the conversation into a new channel and began to discuss strange cases which had fallen into his hands. Interesting. By the way, I haven't heard the details of the Crowley case. How are the Tophams making out? I understand the relatives are trying to break the will. For a moment, Mr. Rolstead remained silent. Yeah, you're not supposed to talk about this when it's current. And Nancy began to think he did not intend to enter into a discussion of the case. The case wasn't turned over to me, Carson, the lawyer said quietly, but I confess I've followed it rather closely because of a special interest I happen to have in Crowley. As the present will stands, I do not believe it can be broken. Then the Tophams will get the entire estate, Mr. Drew commented. Yes, unless another will is uncovered. Another will? Carson Drew inquired innocently. Then you believe Crowley made a second one? Mr. Rolstead hesitated as though uncertain whether or not he should divulge additional information, and then with a quick glance about, lowered his voice. Of course, I wouldn't want this to get out, he began doubtfully. You may trust Nancy not to repeat, Mr. Drew observed, guessing what was in the lawyer's mind. I found that out by experience, and Carson Drew smiled upon his daughter. Then I will say this much. It would not surprise me if another will should come to light. The Tophams treated Crowley. Why have we lost subtitles? I don't know. We've still got the microphone going. I'm going to turn off the profanity filter and see if that makes them come back again. Yeah. The Tophams treated Crowley most unkindly after he had made his will in their favour. About a year ago, Crowley came to my office and told me that he wanted to draw up a new will. He indicated that he intended to cut the Tophams off without a cent. He expressed a desire to write the will himself and asked me a number of questions. I told him exactly how to proceed. When he left my office, he promised that he would have me look over the document when he had drawn it up. Then you actually saw the will? Mr. Drew asked in surprise. No, strange to say, Crowley never came back. I don't know whether he drew up the will or not. That's a plane going very low over us, a little plane. And if he did, there would be an excellent chance that it would not be legal, I suppose. Yes, it's a real trick to draw up a will that cannot be broken. Another modern parlance for that would be challenged, not broken. But Josiah Crowley was a very careful man. Still, if he left even a loophole, the Tophams would drag the matter into court. Yes, it is a foregone conclusion that the Tophams will keep the fortune, whether they have a right to it or not. They have the advantage of money, you know. I believe the other relatives have filed a claim, but they have no proof a second will exists. And without money they cannot hope to fight the Tophams. While her father and Mr. Rolstead discussed the case, Nancy remained silent. But not a word of what was said escaped her. Although she gave no indication of her feelings, the information excited her. After a time, Mr. Drew paid the luncheon cheque, and the three arose and left the dining room. Excuse me. Just needed a quick drink. And left the dining room. Where is it? Mr. Rolstead took leave of them in the lobby. Well, Nancy, did you find out what you wanted to know? Carson Drew inquired after the lawyer had disappeared. I think he's always called Carson Drew. I don't think he's ever called Carson. Sometimes he might get called Mr. Drew. It's intriguing how some books, especially earlier ones, had a tendency to always use both names of a character. Maybe it was when they had initially come up with a character, they liked the feel of the two names together. Well, Nancy, did you find out what you wanted to know? Carson Drew inquired after the lawyer had disappeared. Oh, Father, it's just as I suspected. Mr. Crowley did make a second will. You mustn't jump hastily at conclusions, Mr. Drew warned her. It is possible that Crowley never drew up the will at all, or if he did, he may have destroyed it. That's possible, of course. But he had no love for the Tophams, and I have a feeling he hid the will someplace. Oh, if only I could find it. How would you expect to find it? It would be as easy as looking for a needle in a haystack, Mr. Drew replied. If I were you, I would forget about the case, Nancy. I can't forget about it until I've at least made an attempt to find out what became of that will, Nancy insisted stubbornly. All right, dig into the mystery if you like, but I'm afraid you've set yourself an impossible task. I don't see how you hope to discover what became of the will when you haven't even a clue. I'll find a way, Nancy laughed. Give me time and I'll surprise you. But after she had said goodbye to her father and was slowly driving toward home, doubt assailed her. She knew that the odds were against her. Although she was determined to find out what had become of the Crowley will, she was at a loss to know how to begin. As her father had reminded her, she did not have a single clue. "Where there's a will, there's a way," she quoted whimsically. That old proverb is doubly true in the Crowley case. If there actually is a second will, I'm going to find it. And if I do, I hope it won't prove to be in the Tophams' favour. End of the chapter. Now I'm just going to move some things around and write a quick note to myself here when I remember what it was I was going to write. I was reading and I knew exactly what it was I needed to write down. Oh, yes. Right. Sorted. And we shall carry on. Chapter 3, Racing the Storm. Nancy, if you haven't planned anything... Hang on. I'm just checking who's speaking. Nancy, if you haven't planned anything special for the day, I wonder if you would care to do a little errand for me, inquired Carson Drew one morning at the breakfast table. Why, of course, Nancy agreed pleasantly. What is it? I have a number of legal documents which must be delivered to Judge Hartgrave at Masonville sometime before noon. I would take them myself, but I have several important appointments this morning. I'll be glad to do the errand for you, Nancy promised willingly. I can run over to Masonville in the roadster. It isn't more than a 15-mile jaunt. Fine, that's a load off my mind. You're sure you don't mind? So the implication is that she's not at school anymore, I guess. It's such a wonderful day. I'll enjoy the trip. Mr. Drew parted the curtains at the dining room window and looked out. It is a bright day, but I can't say I like the appearance of those clouds in the west. Nancy, in the west, Nancy, I'm afraid it may rain. You know how quickly our storms come up. I'll start just as soon as I can get ready then. Where are the papers? At the office. We can ride down together. Nancy Drew hurried away to... It's another one. Why do you keep saying someone's surname in a book about them? Nancy Drew hurried away to find her hat and purse. Before Mr. Drew had collected his own belongings, she had backed the roadster from the garage and was waiting for him at the curbing. Now, a roadster is a more sporty car. We had that when we were doing the Hardy Boys and the one where the cars were being stolen. We looked up what the different sorts of cars were. There you go. Waiting at the curb. I haven't heard you mention the Crowley case lately, Mr. Drew commented as they rode along together. Have you forgotten about it? Nancy's face clouded. No, I haven't forgotten, but I must admit I've made no progress. I guess I'm not cut out for a detective. Sir, we're missing word count by about 320. Call everyone by their surname when you can. Yes, that sounds like an editorial decision. I guess I'm not cut out for a detective. Don't feel discouraged, Nancy. The Crowley case would baffle a professional. I haven't given it up yet, Father. I may stumble onto a clue one of these days. When they reached the law office, Nancy stopped the roadster and her father got out. He disappeared inside the building and, returning a few minutes later, placed a fat manila envelope in Nancy's hand. Give this to Judge Hartgrave. You know where to find him? Yes, I've no trouble in finding his office. I've frequently driven as far as Masonville. As far as... She was saying it wasn't a big deal, and now she's making it sound like she hasn't really gone very far. Selecting the shortest route to her destination, just dialing it into Google Maps now. Selecting the shortest route to her destination. Choosing the quickest way. I think we're doing word count stuffing. Selecting the shortest route to her destination, Nancy deftly shifted gears and was off. As she rode along the gravel road, her eyes travelled to the field. She looked. Her eyes travelled to the fields on either side of the... This is just so, this is like being at school and you're writing an essay, which when we were younger we called it a story, but later we called it an essay. I don't know why. And they've given you a word count that you have to meet, and it's 1,000 words, and it's like, oh no, I've got 750 words. I need another 250 words. Where can I put the in? Oh yeah, there's the, and that sort of thing. It feels like that. This aspect of writing just at the moment. I don't know if they went for a word count per chapter or if they went for the overall book length. I really can't remember if the chapters had a really variable length or if they were a lot more even. I know some of them are in the Stratemeyer Syndicate books are a lot more even for chapter length, because it always feels like a book that's been published by the chapter in like a magazine or something like that, and so therefore you're trying to hit a similar word count each time because people are expecting a decent amount of story every time, instead of like, oh well, that chapter was only 3 sentences in 2 paragraphs. I feel ripped off. Thank you. And it doesn't have that sort of feel about it. It has more of a feel of they're all fairly similar. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that's what we've got going on here. Unless she started with this chapter or something like that and hadn't really got fluent. Because sometimes authors will not start at the beginning of the book. They'll fill that in later. Anyway, we'll carry on. Selecting the shortest route to her destination, Nancy deftly shifted gears and was off. As she rode along the gravel road, her eyes travelled to the fields on either side of the highway, like a true daughter of the Middle West. Where the hang is the Middle West? Is that what we now call the Midwest? Which is not in the West at all, by the way. If you do not come from the US of A and you look at a map and point to somewhere that's called Midwest, you are very, very confused. A true daughter of the Middle West. So this kind of indicates that it might be Illinois, because Maine is definitely not Middle West. Yeah. I don't know why we think it's Maine for some of the books. Maybe they moved. Like a true daughter of the Middle West, Nancy Drew took pride in the fertility of her state. I don't think we would say that these days. And saw beauty in a crop of... Yeah, it's definitely somewhere in the Midwest, with all those crop-growing states. Saw beauty in a crop of waving green corn, as well as in the rolling hills and expanse of prairie land. Yeah. Okay, we now actually have a bit more location confirmation. More than once, Nancy glanced anxiously at the sky. The sun shone down on the gravel road with a dazzling intensity, but a large black cloud had settled in the west. Now, gravel road is one where it's kind of like this behind us, where it's a clay surface with stones on top, and then the stones gradually bed themselves into the clay. And then you get more stones put on top later on as you need them, as opposed to a sealed road, a road made with tar macadam or tar macadam, or however you want to call it, asphalt, tar seal, or even a concrete road. So yeah, a gravel road. By Jove, Reginald, our corn crops are more fertile than the saloon mistresses of the Middle West. Dost thou concur, my good fellow? Indeed, indeed. Pip, pip. Hi, Sue, great to have you here. I'm trying not to make fun of the Nancy Drew book, but some of the phrasings are a little bit weird. And Guriki joining right in. And Guriki says that Starmancer's shoe is a ravishing box of chocolates and a glorious champion. Yeah, but the box of chocolates is edible. Don't know how they're ravishing, though. It's used as a complimentary word, but where it comes from is not complimentary at all. It's original, well, it's early usage. Right, let's carry on. The sun shone down on the gravel road with dazzling intensity. Oh, how the tables turn indeed. The sun shone down with dazzling intensity, but a large black cloud had settled in the west. Still, it did not appear to be rolling up very fast, and Nancy told herself that there was no need to worry. It won't rain for an hour or two, and by that time I'll be home, she thought. This is the way, indeed. Oh, dear. Goriki says, why am I edible and Starmancer's shoe is not? Oh, that's right. It was Shu who said that Goriki is a ravishing box of chocolates. And Goriki said, why am I? And then the 8-ball says, yes, this is the way. Excellent. Right, this is why we have these commands. Lots of fun. And this is why we do this, because it's lots of fun. If it was all dull and boring, there's no point. Yeah, it's fun nonsense. Yeah. Won't rain for an hour or two, and by that time I'll be home, she thought. She thought. You turned those off, by the way. Nancy took her time on the road, and it was nearly so that she. Hang on a minute. It won't rain for an hour or two, and by that time I'll be home, she thought. Top knots, yes. Now, I found them. Which is just as well, thank you, ears to you. Starmancer Shoe has redeemed top knots. I just need to find where I need to turn on the egg timer. It's here, and there it is. And I need to start it over here. And I'm putting them on right now. There you go. I'm glad you put that in again there, Goriki, because I put that in right at the beginning as well. So don't forget, folks, you can use the read tag for our Discord server and promote our Discord. Yes, that would be really cool if you aren't already using one. Nancy took her time on the road, and it was nearly 11 o'clock. But she's just said she's worried about this cloud coming, but she should get home in time. But I still need to be aware of it. And so she took her time on the road. Nancy took her time on the road, and it was nearly 11 o'clock when she finally drove into Masonville. It took an hour to go 15 miles. She went at once to Judge Hartgrave's.
15 miles an hour.
Yeah, she's doing 15 miles an hour on average. Funny that. She went at once to Judge Hartgrave's office, but was informed that he had gone to the courthouse. Nancy knew that the legal papers which she had been sent to deliver were important, and rather than leave them with the office girl, she set off in search of the judge. She had considerable trouble in finding him, and it was nearly 12 o'clock when at last she delivered the manila envelope into his hands, so it took her another hour to find him. I don't have time for this. I have to do that. Ooh, I want to do that. Sounds like a legit woman to me. Actually, I've seen guys do that. Definitely. It was nearly 12 o'clock when at last she delivered the manila envelope into his hands. Learning that Nancy was the daughter of Carson Drew, Judge Hartgrave insisted that she take luncheon at his home before returning to River Heights. Lovely. Nancy accepted the invitation and spent a very pleasant hour in company with the judge and his wife. So this is now 1 o'clock. When at last she had insisted that she must start for home, it was after 1:30. He's asking the 8-ball.
2.5 hours later.
Am I such a time careless person? And the 8-ball says, outlook good. With a boxing glove. What does that mean? Obviously 8-ball thinks you are. She must start at home. It was when at last she had insisted that she must start for home. It was after 1:30. I have half a notion to take a different route back. We need to have the foreshadowing shadow blinking. Goriki is affirming Coffee Boy. Coffee Boy is an astonishing champion.
Thank you.
Thank you, he says. I have half a notion to take a different route back, she told Judge Hartgrave as she stepped into her blue roadster. It's a beautiful drive on the river road, but the trip will take longer and I'm afraid it may rain. So she's wanting to go the longer route home.
Is she dim?
I think this is one of those Stratemeyer Syndicate story setups where the readers go, oh no, we know what's going to happen. But the character goes ahead and does it so that the readers feel like they are a little bit smarter and therefore they want to keep reading.
Whether they're actually a little bit smarter or not is another question in time.
Yes, indeed. Coffee Boy's an astonishing champion of coffee, he says. Yeah, when you come up, can you bring one?
Yeah, I've just had mine.
Yeah, just an iced one will be easy, thanks.
Have you had your
Yeah, I did.
branded?
Yep. Just do a homemade
I'm
one.
going to bother saying the name.
I know, no. It's all right. It's all right.
I got the hang of it.
Yep. The trip will take longer and I'm afraid it may rain. Judge Hartgrave looked up at the sky, but in spite of a general murkiness, the sun was shining. I'd be worried about that murkiness, actually. A flat or a momoa mocha. No, an iced coffee. which you can have one day. I'll make you an iced coffee and then you'll know what it's like, a homemade iced coffee. We don't put ice in our iced coffee. Iced means cold.
Dilute your coffee.
Why would you dilute your coffee, says PJ. Yeah.
As someone who's nicknamed Coffee Boy, I feel like I have the right to ask this question.
Yes, I think you have the right to ask that question too. Right, I'm going to carry on reading.
Sorry, interrupting.
Judge Hartgrave looked up at the sky, but in spite of a general murkiness, the sun was shining. Hey Google, why would you dilute coffee? Yeah. Oh, don't believe it'll rain for an hour or two, he said optimistically. That big cloud is only bluffing. That big cloud. Then I'll take the river road, Nancy decided. She said goodbye and started the motor. Soon she was spinning along the road, which wound in and out along the Muskoka River. Please somebody look up the Muskoka River and see if it's a real one. Muskoka. Nancy met few automobiles, for the road was infrequently travelled. She did not hurry. Egg timer off. Top knots off. I've heard of it before, says Coleslaw. Cool. The TTRPG show I'm watching has a guy they named Key Boy who holds the keys. yeah, might as well have a title that says what you do. And Goriki has redeemed Ariel. What's all this about? Time for the hoop of alternatives. What are we going to have? Just going to wait for it to arrive. Those crop ears still bother me. I still haven't managed to figure out why they do that. And we have mini ears. We've still got all the Disney ones. I forgot to change them. I got the other stuff changed. Hang on a minute. I'm going to let you choose, actually, Goriki. You can choose which mini ears. This is the one I usually wear because it's the one the only one I used to have. I've also got this one, which is, or I've got this one, which is actually done with little sequins. You can. The river is the third largest river draining the southern Ontario landmass by average annual flow. Wow. So yeah, Goriki's now choosing which mini ears The usual one. Okay, cool. You don't like my fancy ones. There. Right. Turn the light back up. No, not the light. The egg timer back on, and we'll carry on. Nancy met few automobiles, for the road was infrequently travelled. She did not hurry, but took time to enjoy the scenery.
She really is a bit daft, isn't she?
Yeah, but apparently she's clever compared with most of the other girls. Yeah. Overhanging trees with dense foliage shaded the road and formed a tunnel which all but blotted out the sky. You can see now why I've chosen a picture like this for the background. Presently, as Nancy drove into a clearing, she was astonished to see how dark it had become, because the trees were hiding how dark it was before. Evidently, the big black cloud which had attracted her attention earlier in the day was no longer bluffing.
Coffee has arrived.
Coffee, thank you.
And so has one of the local nerds, me. I've just been resetting some RAM in a computer because
What are you going to do with
it
it?
was having issues with not booting when it
Oh,
should.
that's right. That's the monitoring one.
Yeah. Also, that's why I've got a
Power cable round his neck.
computer power cable.
Kettle cord.
Yeah.
I was at a nerd meeting one time, a nerd do one time, social event one time. Yes, me, the housewife with grey hair, who's never worked a computer job in their life. I was part of this group of nerds. It was called Geek Zone, and we used to have social get-togethers from time to time. And I was at one of those, and we were I don't know why, we were talking something about power cables, and I said, "Oh, you mean what you need is haven't you got a kettle cord at home?" And they said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Those ones that you use to plug into a kettle back in the days before we had the ones where you put the kettle on the top of the charging the power base."
You mean a cordless kettle?
The cordless kettles, yes, which actually have a cord to the base. So
Of course
to
they
me,
do.
this is a kettle cord, because this is the sort that you used to plug in to a kettle. Now, if you are not from a British background, you won't know what I'm talking about. It's an electric jug for heating water, so you don't have to light the stove to heat your water up. It's a lot faster, by the way.
Americans don't tend to have electric jugs for heating water the
Partly
way
'cause of their power
Commonwealth
voltage.
countries do.
Yeah, great for tea, yeah, definitely. So there's that one, and the other common one that used to be around is a Mickey Mouse cord.
I don't have one of those on hand.
No, that's right. If you find one in your room and you come screaming out here waving it at us, I'll know why.
I'm just
You'll know
trying-
exactly which one I mean if I show you one.
I'm just
And
trying to,
the person tried to tell me what they were called, and I said, I'm not going to remember that, but everybody knows what I'm talking about when I call it a kettle cord. And everybody else is standing, all the other techs, the geeks and the nerds are all standing there nodding, saying, yeah, kettle cord. We all know what that one is. And also because a lot of them are doing customer support in situations like in offices and stuff like that. So therefore, they are talking to normal people. What?
Have fun, everyone.
Thank you. Yes, we will have fun.
I see I have successfully derailed the
Yes, you have successfully
subject as
derailed the
usual.
subject as usual. That's fine. I do it myself too. You've learnt well. I have taught you well. Yeah, I don't know how to call it for people in North America to know what I'm referencing. I say electric kettle or the hot water boiler. Yeah, I wouldn't call it a boiler, but having lived in England, because they actually call their hot water cylinder sometimes the hot water boiler. I don't know why. Because you don't boil water in a hot water cylinder.
No. Well, actually, our house is one of the few that
Yeah, I
actually
know, we do
has
occasionally.
boiled it.
We do occasionally. We heat our water in our
we
fireplace.
have both a solar water heater on the roof, but we've also got a wetback on our open fireplace, which means that
When the
used to
fire's
be that
going,
we
it
would,
heats the water in the cylinder.
overheat the hot water cylinder a few times.
Yes, it's
so
got a
it would
little
just
special valve that
dump
stops
out
it from...
to protect itself.
Yes. Anyway, so kettle cord. Why were we talking about a kettle cord?
Because I was waving around in front of you.
Oh, yes, that's what you had in hand. And we have distracted ourselves for long enough that my book has actually locked itself. That used to happen all the time. It hasn't happened for a long time.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Right. Shame. Okay. What was it for this time? Me shaming myself? Yeah, for that we call it the furnace. Yeah, we don't call it a furnace probably because they've always been... No, not always. Largely speaking, they're electric. We don't tend to have gas ones. And so therefore you don't have a furnace where the pilot light has gone out and things like that with issues. They're just the hot water cylinder. And if you're looking at a house plan and there's a circle inside a fairly square cupboard and it has HWC written on it, it's the hot water cylinder. That's the big tank that heats up your water. Anyway, waving kettle cords about with reckless abandon. Yeah. Aren't you glad that I don't have a Mickey Mouse cord? I'll have to find one someday because I know some people don't remember them until I show them. And I go, look, this is a Mickey Mouse cord. And then, oh, yeah, that's right. We've been ruined for the English language through being raised with Australian, British, American and Canadian English classes. Yeah, all pre-8, grade 8. Yeah, I can understand. Whereas in New Zealand, we're familiar with lots of other terms just because of different, like TV mainly. Right, we'll carry on. Evidently the big black cloud, which had attracted her attention earlier in the day, was no longer bluffing. It had grown rapidly in size and was spreading over the sky in an alarming fashion. As Nancy Drew watched, the sun vanished as though by magic. Time for the randomizer of deciding. I don't know why that gif was so short. Thank you, Shu. What are we going to get? Mini ears. There are other things on there, not just mini ears. So, Shu, you get... I know what is about the most accurate response. Which mini ears would you like? Would you like the traditional mini ears? You know, like you get it at Disneyland, except these aren't made the same way. Would you like the sequined mini ears? The one with, oh, okay, the one with ears. Or the one that's just the plain bow. That's what I was trying to say. Here we go, the one with the ears. I will get them changed before next time, I hope. And now I need to put this back on screen. Where is it? There. And go. Right. As Nancy Drew watched, the sun vanished as though by magic. Poof, sun's gone. How foolish of me to take this road. She was going to anyway. She was looking for an excuse. She was asking for opinions to back up her idea. We all heard it, didn't we? I'm going to get caught in the storm. There isn't a chance I can make it. If it was me and there was a cloud like that, I wouldn't have called it a storm. It was just rain. Anyway. Although the river road was perfectly safe in dry weather, Nancy knew that a little rain would make it dangerously slippery because it's a clay road with a little bit of stones on top of it. Then, too, the road was little travelled, and in case of accident, she could not depend upon passing motorists for aid. If her roadster slipped into a ditch, it would be necessary to walk miles for help. I'm just going to take that cushion off. The reason why I'm leaning over so much is just because, yeah, ears. Need to see the ears. Few persons lived along the river road, for the land was not considered valuable. Unlike these days, if there is a river, people want a house there because it's expensive, because it's got a view. Forget about the fact that it floods. In the spring of the year, with the arrival of heavy rains, the Muskoka River sometimes overflowed its banks and spread over the farmland, destroying the newly planted crops. Let me interrupt yet again. This time it is to say, in parts of England, they relied on that. They knew that the spring rains were going to bring floods, and they relied on those floods to provide a fresh layer of silt on the ground to enrich the soil for the next set of grazing or crops that they produced there. And they just didn't put any crops into there until after the spring floods, or they didn't put any animals there when they knew there was the likelihood of a flood coming through. They actually used the fact that it was going to flood as part of it. In fact, the town that we lived outside of a little in England had a section of it called the Lammas lands. And that is actually a reference to those fields that flood by the river, and they were owned, those ones were owned by, I think, the local church, and it was to do with gifts given or something like that. So if you're looking up the word Lammas lands and it doesn't say anything about flooded lands, then, and it says something about churches, that's why. So yeah, that's why I covered all of that. So let's ignore that. But yeah, it doesn't have to be a useless thing to have lands that flood when the river gets full in spring. It can be used well. Hi Void, great to have you here. We had your tip video today. It was lovely. The Muskoka River sometimes, yes, Grandma Jevs is here. In the spring of the river, with the arrival of heavy rains, the Muskoka River sometimes overflowed its banks and spread over the farmland, destroying the newly planted crops. For this reason, the district was not a popular one, and the land was held by poor folk. If only I can find a farmhouse where I can drive in until the storm passes, Nancy thought desperately. The sky was now entirely overcast, and in among the trees it was as dark as night. Nancy could not see the road distinctly, and switched on the headlights of her roadster. A brisk breeze began to stir the trees, and the leaves seemed to whisper a fearful warning of the storm to come. A feeling of uneasiness took possession of Nancy Drew. Nancy Drew, we have to say her double-barrel name. She stepped on the accelerator and the roadster fairly leapt forward as though it too understood the need for haste. Suddenly, a flash of forked lightning coursed across the sky and was followed by a loud clap of thunder. That was close, Nancy murmured uncomfortably. Yes. Well done. Watch streak in place indeed. And hydrating. Yes, we are all hydrating, folks. Let's drink water together. And we will stretch after this. Thank you, Voidy. It is really good to be reminded that we need to do those things, including stretching out your hands if you've been working at the computer for a while, because often you end up clamping your hands down. Now get care packaged. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So I'm just pushing my hands back a little bit to loosen them up. Not damaging, not pushing them too hard, but just a little bit, because otherwise you get these tight muscles through here, and the tendons also tighten up. And also do things like twist things round, your hand around as part of the stretches. But this is the big one. Relax them and then stretch them, and then relax them and then stretch them. Or we can go like this as well. Just remembering somebody there. Right. Thank you for those redeems. Definitely appreciated. We will carry on. So she's got the storm about to break over her. Where did it go? A flash of forked lightning coursed across the sky and was followed by a loud clap of thunder. That was close, Nancy murmured uncomfortably. She bent low over the wheel and took the curves as fast as she dared. An unexpected gust of wind struck the road and blew dust in every direction. As the cold air struck her, Nancy realised that the storm was almost upon her. Already she could see the rain sweeping down upon her from the far hills. Frantically, Nancy glanced about for a possible shelter. On down the road a short distance, she caught sight of an old farmhouse and a dilapidated barn which stood near the highway. If only I can get there before the rain strikes me, Nancy thought anxiously, but the storm would hold off no longer. Large drops of rain began to splash against the windshield, slowly at first, then faster and faster. The sky had taken on a yellowish cast. Then unexpectedly came a second flash of lightning, and simultaneously a deluge of rain. Nancy turned on the windshield wiper, but the rain was blinding in its violence. It was impossible to see more than a few feet ahead of the automobile, and almost in an instant the road had dissolved into a sea of mud. Nancy had been caught in a number of storms, but never one like this. She feared that she would slip into a ditch before she could reach the shelter of the barn. Or if she drives more slowly, that might be less likely to happen. Then at the side of the road the barn loomed up. Deluge, yes. A sudden downpour, lots and lots and lots of rain, a deluge. Then at the side of the road the barn loomed up, and in relief Nancy saw that the doors were wide open. Without an instant's hesitation she headed straight for the building and drove in, because she's driving a car that's got the roof folded down. Yeah, a severe flood, that's the one. It can also mean just lots and lots of rain causing flood-like conditions, not just what's down at this level, but what's coming down. No, we do have another chapter. Oh, okay, there's a picture. I don't have the picture available to you. There's the picture. She's driving in, and there's someone standing there. There's lightning behind her. That one shows the roof of the car up, but I thought it happened that she didn't have it up. I don't know. Without an instant's hesitation, she headed straight for the building and drove in. Safely inside, she turned off the motor and the lights, and with a sigh of relief sank back against the cushions. "Well, you got in just in time," said a pleasant voice behind her. Startled, Nancy Drew turned quickly and saw a girl of her own age regarding her with interest. Even as the stranger spoke, the storm broke in full violence. A cold blast of wind rattled the barn doors and sent a sheet of rain inside. "I beg your pardon," Nancy apologised as she climbed from the roadster. "It wasn't very polite of me to run in here the way I did." "You're more than welcome to the shelter, I'm sure," the stranger told her kindly. "I'm afraid we haven't much else to offer." In the semi-darkness, Nancy studied the girl curiously. She had been impressed with her cultured voice and manner, and now she noted that her clothing, while not expensive, was neat and well made. The girl did not appear to be the daughter of a farmer who would live on this poor land, yet she seemed to fit into her background. Interesting. "It looks to me as though we're in for a real storm," the girl said, and smiled pleasantly. She glanced outside at the pelting rain. "I'm afraid you'll be forced to remain here for some time." "So long as I'm not out in the rain, I don't mind," Nancy replied quickly. "That is, if you don't object." "Object?" The girl spoke impulsively. "Oh, you can't understand how eager we are for visitors. Grace and I seldom have a chance to talk with anyone our own age. Sometimes a whole week will go by and we won't see anyone but the postman." Nancy Drew had a natural talent for unearthing interesting stories. She should be a reporter. And now a sixth sense seemed to tell her that she had encountered something unusual. She was eager to learn more about the girl and her reason for leading such an isolated life. "I must thank you for your hospitality," Nancy said with a friendly smile. "After all, perhaps the storm has done us both a real favour in throwing us together." At that moment, Nancy Drew little dreamed that the next few hours were to reveal the truth of her polite utterance. End of chapter. Oh yes, there's enough time to have the next chapter. Oh, that's good. So I was a bit worried that it was going to not have enough time. Could easily have ended up a romance novel series too. Chapter 4, An Interesting Story. "The storm is getting worse every minute," Nancy Drew's companion observed. Nancy followed her to the barn door and looked out. The rain was now coming down in torrents, and as the girls stood in the doorway, a sudden gust of cold wind blew a sheet of water into their faces. "Oh, let's get back where it's dry," Nancy laughed. "This is terrible." "It's getting cold too," said her companion with chattering teeth. "Why not come into the house with me? It's far more comfortable there, and unless I'm mistaken, this storm will continue for an hour or so." "I don't like to trouble you." "Oh, it's no trouble at all. Grace will never forgive me if I don't bring you inside." She turned to Nancy with an apologetic smile. "I guess I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Allie Horner, and I'm Nancy Drew." "Not the daughter of Carson Drew, the noted lawyer?" "Yes," Nancy admitted with surprise. "Do you know my father?" "Oh, no, but I guess everyone has heard of him." Allie Horner began to take off the raincoat which she wore. "Here, take this, and I'll find you a pair of rubber boots." "Don't you want your raincoat?" I don't want to take your raincoat," Nancy protested. "What will you wear?" "Oh, I have an old coat hanging here on a nail. I'll use that. Anyway, the rain won't hurt my dress." Rough work clothes, maybe? Under protest, Nancy donned the raincoat and put on a pair of rubber boots, which were several sizes too large for her. She made such a grotesque picture that the two girls could not help but laugh. Then they closed the barn doors to keep the car dry, I guess. Hand in hand, they splashed through the mud toward the farmhouse. As they ran, a vivid flash of lightning momentarily illuminated the sky and caused the girls to cringe. The rain pelted down steadily, and the atmosphere was much colder than it had been 10 minutes before. "If it gets any colder, we'll have hail," Allie chattered as the two reached the shelter of the porch. Dropping their muddy boots outside, Allie flung open the door, and they entered a warm kitchen. Just a wee tip: if you ever go to a farmhouse and they have boots that are lying just on their sides, fallen over, lying on top of each other, don't be helpful and tidy them up by standing them upright, because the family may leave their gumboots lying down, so that when the rain happens, you only get a little bit of moisture around the top of the boot, which is the bit that's down instead of up. So it gets a little bit of moisture there instead of staying upright and filling up with water. Okay? Tip. Dropping their muddy boots outside, Allie flung open the door and they entered a warm kitchen. As the door closed behind them, an older girl who was bending over the kitchen range turned toward them in surprise. "Grace, I've brought you a visitor," Allie said quickly. "Miss Drew, I want you to meet my sister. She's the mainstay of our little family." People should use shoe trees. Wait, that's not the right word. Yeah, there are boot racks where you actually put the boots with the sole of them on top and then the leg hanging down. And you can get ones that heat up so that they dry out the inside of the boots if you've got boots that got wet inside. Yes, I have seen them for sale over here in New Zealand, because we do have a lot of people who still wear gum boots. That's what we call rubber boots over here, because gum diggers wore them. People who were digging up kauri gum, which was exported and turned into things like paint and linoleum and other things like that. Let's carry on. "She's the mainstay of our little family." Grace Horner cordially acknowledged the introduction and greeted Nancy with a warm smile. She was tall and slender, as was her sister, with dark hair and thoughtful brown eyes. Nancy judged that she was at least 4 years older than Allie. Her face was rather serious, and it was evident that responsibility had fallen upon her shoulders at an early age. Nancy was at once attracted to both Grace and Allie and responded to their cordial welcome. "It's nice of you to take me in this way," she told them. "Mercy, it's a pleasure for us," Grace assured her. "We don't see a girl of our own age once in a month unless we go to Masonville, and our visits there aren't very frequent, Miss Drew." "Oh, please call me by my first name," Nancy begged. "Everyone does." Yeah, they're probably still living in a society where it was normal that if somebody was better off than you but a similar age, you used a Mr., Mrs., Miss type of titling system rather than assuming that you could call them by their first name. Hey, Stu, what's a word you can think of that has nearly every vowel in it? Linoleum? Yeah. Vowel in it. Vowel. Not violent. Linoleum. 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 Why do I have to call it linoleum? It's not linoleum, it's linoleum. Got it. Right, carry on. The three girls was, please call me by my first name, everybody does, Nancy begged. The three girls were soon laughing and talking together as though they had always been friends. Nancy knew she was going to like the Horner girls, and it was evident they were delighted with her. Presently, Grace deftly removed a cake from the oven and set it on the table to cool. Let's go into the living room, she suggested. My cake's done, so I don't need to watch it. I'll give you a piece before you go, Nancy, because you don't cut the cake while it's still hot from the oven. Unless you're using it like pudding. You let it cool down a bit, otherwise you might make it collapse. And Grace's cakes are the real thing, Allie declared. I'm not much of a cook myself. I'd rather be outdoors. We don't wish you any bad luck, Nancy, Grace laughed as she led Nancy into the next room, but Allie and I don't care how long it storms. Neither do I, so long as I get home before dark, Nancy replied. Although the living room was warm and comfortable, it was nearly bare of furniture. The floors had been painted and was scantily covered with handmade rag rugs. That's what people used to do with old clothes, is they'd turn them into strips of rags and then plait them together and stitch that plaiting around in a coil to make a rug. My grandmother had a few, and it wasn't because she had nothing else, it was because she didn't like wasting things. So it was quite common for people from older generations to do rag rugs. Also to use them as the weft and warp on weaving. You'd have a cord one way and then you'd run these strips of rag the other way. Handmade rag rugs. With the exception of an old-fashioned divan, an inexpensive table, a few straight-backed chairs, and an old wood stove which furnished heat, there was little in the room. A divan is like a day bed, but it doesn't usually have ends on it. You can lie on it and sleep if you need to. It's used like a sofa or a settee or a settle, or whatever of those terms you want to use, but it doesn't have the fancy back and arms on it. But yeah. There was little in the room. However, dainty white curtains covered the windows, and Nancy realised that although the Horner girls were poor, they had tried hard to make their home attractive. Surely you two girls don't live here alone, do you? Nancy inquired. Allie nodded. Grace and I have been living here since Father died. That was 2 years ago. Mother passed away just before that, the girl added with a slight catch in her voice. But how do you manage? It must be dreadful hard for two girls to run a farm by themselves, said Nancy in wonder. Girls can farm. You just got to use your brains a bit. Our farm isn't very large, and Colster was asking how are they surviving, so we're just about to find out. Our farm isn't very large now, Grace said quietly. We have only a few acres. I know you wonder how we live, but are too polite to ask, Allie broke in. Grace helps a dressmaker at Masonville whenever she can get work. She makes all our clothes too, and I raise chickens. Chickens? Nancy asked in surprise. Can you make much at that? Well, it all depends. This year the market hasn't been so high as usual, and the price of eggs has dropped too. But I enjoy the work, and I could make it pay off if only I could afford to start a flock of white leghorns, because apparently they are more popular. I don't know if white leghorns lay more eggs or if they are more muscular. More pauses. With chickens, when you choose chickens, you are going to raise not large-scale industry, but small scale for home use and small business. You usually have to choose between chickens that are going to lay lots of eggs or chickens that are going to be good for eating. Because usually the chickens that lay lots of eggs are not the ones that get lots of meat on them for eating. There are some which are sort of kind of down the middle. They're not as good at all the eggs and they're not quite as much meat on them as the meaty ones. And so they're a bit of a compromise. And often some of the old varieties of chickens, because there are a really wide variety of sorts of chickens, like they're not species. It's like you can have Royal Gala apples and you can have Braeburns and you can have Granny Smiths and Golden Delicious and Red Dohertys and all of those. Yes, I know I'm using very Kiwi names for all those different varieties of apples. You can do the same sort of thing with chickens. And in the old days, they used to breed them specifically for certain purposes. And then in addition to that, they would breed them so that they would have more ornamental styled feathers to show at agricultural shows. So leghorns are more muscular than meat birds. Yeah, I did wonder if that was the case. Where do we get? I could make it pay off if only I could afford to start a flock of white leghorns. I say again, boy. Yeah, foghorn leghorn, yes. Ellie is a regular outdoor girl, Grace explained with a smile. We divide our work. I attend to the house, but she would rather be outside. We get along very nicely in the summer, Ellie went on. We raise vegetables and have enough for our own use, but in the winter it's hard. I don't know how we'll manage this year. We'll find a way, Ellie, Grace told her with a brave smile. We always have. She rose from her chair and turned to Nancy. I'm sure you're not interested in our misfortunes. It's true that we're poor, but we can still offer a guest a cup of tea. Excuse me while I make it. It was on the tip of Nancy's tongue to protest, but she checked the words just in time. She knew that Ellie and Grace were proud, and that to refuse their hospitality would hurt their feelings. I wish I could help them, Nancy thought, but if I offer to pay for the tea, they'll be offended. Perhaps later on I can engage Grace to make a dress for me. In a few minutes, Grace returned to the living room bearing a tray which had been covered with a clean white napkin. She poured the tea and served the cake with as much poise as though she were gracing an elegant drawing room. I never tasted more delicious cake in all my life, Nancy said warmly. So I wonder if the girls have come from a background where they were actually reasonably okay within society and it's just that everything's fallen apart and there's no money. I don't think they've never been as poor as this when their parents were around, but I don't think they were from a working class family by the sound of the styling of the way they're doing things. The three girls chatted over the teacups and watched the rain beat against the windows. Presently, as Nancy noticed an unusual picture on the wall, she commented on its beauty. Uncle Josiah gave it to us, Ellie told her. If he were only alive now, things would be different. At the mention of the name, Nancy started. Could it be that Ellie referred to Josiah Crowley? It was very unlikely, she decided, yet only the week before her father had told her that there were two girls living on the River Road who should have figured in the will. The relationship would be worth investigating, Nancy told herself. Then your uncle is dead? She inquired sympathetically. Josiah Crowley wasn't really our uncle, Grace replied, but we loved him as much as though he were a relative. Her voice broke, and for a moment she could not go on. He lived next door to us. That was when Mother and Father were alive. All of our misfortunes seemed to come at once. He was the dearest man you ever saw, Ellie added, taking up the story. Some people thought him odd, but we never minded his peculiar ways after you knew him. But you never minded his peculiar ways after you knew him. He was so good and kind to us. We were neighbours for years, until the Tophams induced him to live with them. After that, everything was changed. But he never liked it with the Tophams, Grace declared. They weren't kind to him, and he used to sneak off to visit us, didn't he, Ellie? Yes, he often said that we seemed like his own children. He brought us so many nice gifts. We loved him for himself and not his money, but after our parents died, he hinted that he intended to see to it that we never came to want. I remember the very last day we saw him alive, he told us that he intended to mention us in the will. I have planned a big surprise for you girls. You'll see it in my will. Those were his very words. And then the Tophams got everything, Grace said somewhat bitterly. It isn't that we were expecting any of the money, but it does seem unfair that the entire fortune should go to them. They never cared a snap of their fingers for Uncle Josiah, and I don't believe he intended to leave his money to them. Perhaps you were mentioned in the will they say can't be found, Nancy suggested. Grace and Allie exchanged significant glances and gravely nodded. That's just what we think, Allie announced. Can't something be done about it? It seems only fair that you should have your inheritance. I'm afraid there's nothing we can do, Grace said doubtfully. You see, although we are certain a will was made out in our favour, we have no actual proof. We haven't enough money to fight the case. The Tophams ought to do something for you girls. The Tophams? Allie laughed scornfully. They wouldn't give us a cent. For some time, Allie and Grace Horner talked of Josiah Crowley and his odd ways. To Nancy, it was evident that the girls had loved the old man a great deal. Presently, as the rain ceased and the sun threatened to break through the clouds, Nancy arose to leave. Your story has interested me a great deal, she assured the Horner girls. It's possible my father can do something to help you. He is a lawyer, you know. Oh, we weren't asking for help, Grace interposed quickly. I don't know why we happened to tell you so much. I'm glad you did. And if I can, I want to help you. If my father asks you to come to his office in River Heights, will you do it? Why, yes, I suppose so. How? I suppose so, Grace admitted slowly, but we have told you about everything we know concerning the will. My father is a wonder at unearthing hidden facts, Nancy declared. It's kind of you to tell your father about our case, Allie broke in. We'd be so grateful if something could be done. We don't want a cent that doesn't belong to us, but it does seem as though we should have received a small inheritance. Don't build up your hopes until after I've talked to my father, Nancy advised them as she turned toward the door. If anything can be done, I promise I'll let you know. And that's the end of the chapter. Shall I? Yes, I think I shall. I don't have anyone who's waiting for me to go and cook dinner or anything like that. So I'm going to read one more chapter. I can hear my washing machine beeping in the distance too. Not really something I wanted to be thinking about at the moment. But that's the way it goes. Right. We shall carry on. Chapter 5, A Conference. Although the rain was no longer falling, the river road was a sea of mud. Of course it is. It's a clay road, and it has got very wet. The river road was a sea of mud, and before Nancy Drew started for home, the Horner girls insisted on helping her to put chains on the rear wheels of the roadster. I hadn't really thought about chains for that, but yeah, that does make sense. You'll never make it to the gravel unless you do. Oh, okay, so this part of the road doesn't even have gravel. Grace advised her. The river road is terribly slippery in wet weather. You're sure you want to attempt it? We'd love to have you stay with us until tomorrow. Oh, I've only 2 miles to go before I strike gravel, Nancy returned. I'll make it all right, but before I go, I do wish you would let me pay for all the trouble I've caused you. We couldn't think of accepting money, Grace said quietly. It's been fun having you here, Allie said. Yeah, buy some eggs or something. Good idea. At last, after thanking the Horner sisters for their hospitality, Nancy told them goodbye. Allie and Grace watched her until she'd backed the roadster from the barn and was safely on the road. I don't know what they normally have in the barn that it was sitting with the doors open. That's always puzzled me. You're taking a big chance in this mud, called out Allie after her. If you have any trouble, come back here, added Grace. That is, if you can get back. Don't skid into a tree or into a ditch. That would be worse. Waiting till the cows come home. "What are you trying to do? Make me nervous?" demanded Nancy, but with a smile on her face. "No, we only want to see you get home safely," answered Grace, and by that time the car was so far on its way, no more could be said. Once on her way, Nancy had little trouble, for she was a skillful driver. The mud was heavy, but although the roadster slipped about, she managed to keep it in the road. Nevertheless, she was relieved when at last she reached the main gravelled highway. "I'll stop at my father's office," she decided, as she drove into River Heights. "I want to tell him about my adventure right away." "Got something more in the story, Dad." She parked the car and surveyed it rather ruefully as she climbed out. "Poor thing needs a bath, but even if I did get into mud, it was worth it. Otherwise, I would never have found out about the Horner girls." As Nancy was admitted to her father's private office, he arose from his chair to greet her. "I'm glad you're here safe and sound," he declared, in relief. "I've been worried ever since that storm came up. I telephoned the house, and Hannah said you weren't back. It gave me a bad scare." "I've had a little adventure," Nancy announced, with an important air. Quickly she told of her meeting with the Horner sisters and what she had learned concerning the Crowley will. "Allie and Grace Horner are as poor as church mice, but they're proud too," Nancy ended. "If only we could do something to help them. They deserve a portion of the Crowley estate, but they'll never get it unless someone takes a hand." "From what you say, it looks as though Crowley really did make a will in their favour," Carson Drew commented thoughtfully. "I never had any particular liking for Richard Topham, and I'll admit it will please me to see him lose the money. I'll be glad to do anything I can to help the Horner girls, Nancy. We might invite them to the house for a little conference." "I was hoping you would suggest that," she said. "You say the girls have no idea what became of the will. They never saw it." "Well, it is possible that by talking with them we may learn something which may serve as a clue. I'll invite them to the house tomorrow if you want me to," Nancy said quickly. "You're so clever at asking questions, and the Horner girls will do anything in their power to help." "I don't recall any reference to a telephone." "How are you going to invite them? Write a letter? How long does that take?" Mr. Drew studied his desk calendar for a moment. "All right, but make it the day after tomorrow afternoon at 3. But make it day after tomorrow afternoon at 3. I have no appointment for that hour." It's a slightly odd wording. Now that she had accomplished her purpose, Nancy gave her father a hug and fairly danced toward the door. "I knew you'd try to help them," she called back over her shoulder. "Now that you've promised, I'll scamper off and let you get your work done." Nancy's interest in the Crowley case had intensified since her chance meeting with the Horner girls. "Well, we've only just had that happen." "Yes." And it was with impatience that she awaited the conference. All the day of the appointment she kept watching the clock, wondering if Allie and Grace would keep the engagement. She had sent them the invitation and they had promised to come, but Nancy was a trifle uneasy, especially as the hour of 3 approached and the two girls had not arrived. "I don't see why they don't come," she fretted. The words were scarcely out of her mouth when the doorbell jangled. "That must be the girls now," she cried as she hurried to open the door. It was indeed Allie and Grace Horner. Nancy greeted them enthusiastically, and ushering them into the comfortable study, introduced her father. At first the Horner sisters were rather ill at ease, but after a few minutes they relaxed and began to talk frankly. "Tell me about Josiah Crowley," Carson Drew suggested. "I understand that he was rather a peculiar man." "Oh, he was," Allie began impulsively. "I've seen him go about hunting for his spectacles when they were on his nose all the time." "That's not peculiar, that's actually common among people who are very busy in their minds with other things and forget." "Did he ever hide things?" Mr. Drew inquired. "Did he?" Allie laughed. "He was always putting things away in what he called a safe place. The place was usually so safe that he could never find it again." Once again, that's not particularly peculiar. "Did he ever say anything which would lead you to believe that he had hidden a will?" Allie shook her head. "Not that I can remember." Why, he did too, Grace broke in. One day when he was at our house, he got to talking about the Tophams and the way they were trying to get his money. I guess they'll be fooled all right when they find out I've made another will, he said with that odd little chuckle of his. This time I'm not going to trust it to any lawyer. I'll put it away in a place I know will be safe. That's right, Allie agreed. I'd forgotten. Was Crowley living with the Tophams at the time he told you this? Carson Drew asked quickly. Grace nodded. Do you think it possible that he hid the will somewhere in the house? You mean at the Tophams? Grace inquired. Of course, I have no way of knowing, but it's my opinion that he did. Nancy and her father exchanged quick glances as the same thought occurred to them. Perhaps the Tophams had discovered the will and already had destroyed it. I hope not. Carson Drew asked a few more questions. The Horner girls were eager to help, but they were unable to furnish additional information which had a direct bearing on the missing will. After Nancy had served tea, they thanked Carson Drew for his interest in them and arose to depart. If I find that I am able to help you in any way, I will do so, Mr. Drew told the sisters as he escorted them to the door. And of course there will be no charge for my services. However, unless the will is found, there is really very little that can be done. After Allie and Grace had left, Nancy turned inquiring eyes upon her father. Charming girls, he commented, and undoubtedly deserving. Then you'll help them? Nancy demanded eagerly. I'm afraid there is nothing I can do, Nancy, Mr. Drew returned regretfully. The will is probably lost forever. It wouldn't surprise me if it had been destroyed. You mean the Tophams? Carson Drew nodded. The same thought came to me, Nancy declared. It would be just like them to destroy it if it fell into their hands. They have no scruples whatsoever. Of course, we have no proof the Tophams did away with the will, Nancy. It would be very unwise to suggest such a thing to the Horner girls. They deserve a portion of the estate, but without the will, nothing can be done. If they took the matter to court, they wouldn't have a chance to win. I suppose you're right, Nancy admitted unwillingly. But while she dropped the subject for the time being, Nancy Drew did not forget the Horner sisters. She continued to hope that by some queer twist of fate they would come into their rightful inheritance. If the will has been destroyed, I don't see how anyone can help them, she told herself rather unhappily. But until I'm sure of it, I'm not going to give up. She squared her shoulders with determination. I'll find some way to discover what became of the will, she said. And that's the end of the chapter. And I'm actually going to stop there, just because I'm starting to get a tickly throat and I don't want it to get too tickly. So there you go. We've started on the first of the Nancy Drew books. So exciting. And yeah, she's not too bad, actually. She's not a ditz, but, well, she was in terms of the storm, but that's storytelling for you. But not bad indeed. And I will definitely be sticking with these ones because the other ones aren't in public domain yet. They've got another 25 years to go or something like that. But even then, going by what I've heard about the editorial decisions made with the stories and the sort of changes that were made, I don't think we need to go there. I think the older ones are probably the better stories. They've got stronger characters for a start. So far we haven't had any particular racism because we haven't had anyone of notable other background except for class. I would expect we will get a little bit at some stage, but that's probably more to do with whether somebody is coloured and working for somebody else. And when I say coloured, I mean someone who's not white. And I'm not using the term coloured as a negative the way apparently it means in the States, because that's just not on my radar. So there you go. That's Nancy Drew. Yay! We've started it. We're probably about a third of the way through. I'm not sure if it's going to be a 3 session read or a 4 session read, depends on how long it takes us. If you do find out anything to do with any of the stuff that comes up in the story, please go over to the Discord server. I am right now making a channel for Nancy Drew in the books section, so you go over to the server, you join the server if you haven't already. You won't be able to do anything till I approve you. But yeah, once you've joined the server and I've approved you, you can write in most of the channels. So you've got your main channels at the beginning, you've got the announcements, there's text channels, which are just normal ones, and then you've got a section called books, and I am going to put a new channel in there just called Nancy Drew. Let's see if I can put an emote at the beginning of it. No. Oh, I have to do it elsewhere to get that to work. One of those. And copy it if it will let me, and then paste it in. Yes, it worked. Create channel. So it's in books. Let's just see where it is. Oh, it's right down the bottom. I have to drag it up to the top. Dragging it up to the top so you can find it more easily. In the book section, it's got a question mark at the beginning, but if you're ever trying to find a channel and you use search, you don't have to put the emotes that are used. Is that a wild bird? Oh, the one that you're hearing, that's a blackbird that you're hearing. Yes, it is a wild bird. I don't have any caged birds. And it's up on the roof somewhere, and that sort of call that it's making, that is often referred to as chinking. I don't know why, it just does. It's a word that sticks in my head. So there you go, we have a Nancy Drew channel. If you find out anything about her, you are most welcome to go and put it over in the Discord server in the Nancy Drew channel. Yeah, cute ambience. Yeah, definitely. How much are they paid? Chinking. No, not at all. Blackbirds, very English, but they're probably in other countries as well. Not starlings, those are the ones that are really shiny. Blackbirds are also black. Starlings are black and blackbirds are black. Blackbirds, they don't have that oily sheen, that sort of bluish green sheen on them that a starling has. Similar size bird. The main body is about this big. I don't know how long the tail is. Working hard tonight for you. Yes, definitely. The male blackbird is quite black without that sheen, and then the female blackbird is a very, very, very dark brown. But they're about the same size as each other. And they're around. They were an import when the Europeans were first settling in New Zealand because people were missing the birds that they had back home, and so they brought birds over with them. That's how we have starlings, which are the ones that are a softer, lighter brown. They have a brown back, a cream-coloured front with little brown spots all over it. And starlings have a particular type of... No, starlings, those are not starlings. Starlings are the shiny ones I just told you about. Let's not talk about them. The one that you heard before is a blackbird. Are they considered invasive? They're not trying to get rid of them, which is usually what happens if we have an invasive species. They do compete with native birds. We have a lot of native birds in New Zealand, different varieties. There are a lot that have gone extinct because we had more varieties of ground-dwelling or flightless birds than varieties than any other country. because New Zealand was so isolated, we didn't have land mammals that would compete with them or eat them. And then the Europeans arrived and brought all sorts of rodents and other things like that. Yes, it was a bird heaven. It was indeed. Some of our varieties of birds that are very easy to catch, even if they're not ground dwelling or flightless, have managed to survive because there was a population on some of the islands that are a bit hard for rats to swim to and things like that. Now a bird haven, bird heaven, and then now a bird haven. So we do have a lot of European birds. We have sparrows, we have blackbirds, we have starlings, thrushes. That's the brown one with the spots on the front, the cream chest and the spots on front. A thrush has a lovely singing voice. We have things like skylarks, but you only really hear them in summer. They're a small bird that flies up high in the sky, and you hear them singing up high. It always sounds like summertime when you hear a skylark. Sometimes called a meadowlark. I don't know what the difference is. A bunch of other ones like that. We have mynahs, which are originally from India, MYNAH, and they were brought in to deal with an insect pest that was causing problems on cattle. Was it ticks or something? I can't remember. They are a bird that are a real pain. They're more of a problem than most of the other ones because they can be quite aggressive to other birds. Now, there's a native bird we've got called a tui, which has a gorgeous song, and it's also a shiny black bird with that sheen, but it's bigger than a starling is. And the tui, sometimes it used to be called sometimes a parson bird, has a little wee cluster of white feathers on its throat. And they also can be aggressive. They're territorial. They will actually fight off other birds that come into the area at certain times a year, but not as badly as the mynahs will, although they will chase mynahs away. But mynahs will wait outside another bird's nest, like if they're nesting in the edge of a roof, and the little bird hears another bird land on the roof, and so the little bird will stick its head out expecting mum coming to give me food, and the mynahs will actually peck at them and hoik them out of the nest and kill them, and maybe eat them, maybe not. So mynahs are a bit of a problem, but then they were helping with dealing with, I think it was ticks on cows, on cattle, I'm not sure. There's another bird that we have, which is the Australian magpie, which is not the same as the European magpie. They are a black and white bird, which is why it's called pie, because there's piebald and skewbald, and you may have heard of those as colour terms for horses. Pie is black and white, and skew is brown and white. Piebald is black and white spotty combination of coat colouring, and skewbald is brown and white coat colouring. There you go, things you didn't know you'd find out about. So with horses, they use piebald and skewbald for colouring denotion. So magpies, black and white, very, very intelligent. They do look like they're a member of the corvid family, like crows and ravens and rooks and all that sort of stuff, with the quite strong angular beak, not a skinny pointy one, but it's quite a triangular beak. And they are brilliant mimics. You can train them to mimic human voices and stuff like that. I know people who used to have ones as pets, individuals as pets, and they would do that. The Australian ones are different to physically. One of the big differences between the Australian and the European magpie is that the Australian ones have a really long tail, but if they get a colony of them living together in trees, like a rookery of rooks, they can be quite aggressive to people walking past. Yes, there are some kids who used to have to walk to school wearing bike helmets because the magpies would try and dive bomb them and peck at their heads, just because. Farmers don't like them because they'll have a go at small animals sometimes. But yeah, such a wide variety. We have way more other ones that are native birds, and you can find out all about them somewhere. But the one that you were hearing before is a blackbird, and that's a very familiar sound. So there you go, some extra bonus information. I'll see you all next time, which should be in 3 days' time, unless anything else comes up. for the next session of Nancy Drew and the Secret of the Old Clock. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. We'll see you all then. Look after yourselves. Stay hydrated. Be kind to your mind. And don't